We have a ton of new eliminations this week in the playoff eliminator. I mean, a lot of teams are now eliminated based off of the results from this weekend, not just because certain teams lost, but also I've kind of changed the parameters here. Last week, I thought that a 3-loss team could possibly get to the SEC championship, the ACC championship, the Big 10 or Big 12 championship, not the Big 10. I thought because there's so much parity in those conferences, but we have enough teams at the top that are still undefeated or are sitting there with 1 loss. I don't think a 3-loss team can get to the conference championship in any of the Power 4 conferences. So just moving that down, or up, I should say, that eliminated a bunch of teams, and then you had some crazy results. So we have, again, a bunch of new eliminations this week. I'm not even going to talk about the group of 4 teams just because there's so many teams out of the Power 4. All right, I'm not going to talk about a group of 5 teams, I should say. We'll kind of revisit that next week. I mean, it's kind of clear cut. Whoever wins the American is going to go to the playoff now that UNLV has lost. I think that's, again, it's pretty obvious how that's going to go. I think all the conferences are eliminated except for the top teams in the American. But we'll maybe talk about that a little bit more next week with some more big games coming up on this weekend at that group of 5 level. So let's get into the eliminations. And again, we are not just talking at large. We're talking about completely eliminated. These are the teams we eliminated last week: Boston College, Michigan State, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. That's it. That's all we had eliminated. But just, I mean, look at the new eliminations. There are a ton of them. Check it out: Arizona, Arkansas, Auburn, Clemson, Colorado, Florida, Florida State, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi State, North Carolina, Oklahoma State, South Carolina, Syracuse, UCF, West Virginia. Tons of new eliminations this week. Some of these teams didn't even lose, but again, it's all about in the ACC, SEC, and in the Big 12. If you have 3 losses, I just don't see you getting to the conference championship game. I mean, technically, yeah, you're still alive, but there are, again, too many teams at the top that are this far into the season. They're undefeated or have 1 loss. I can't see a 3-loss team getting there. It's just going to be too tough. And then in the Big 10, I don't see a 2-loss team getting there. I just maybe, but it's unlikely that a 2-loss team gets there. But a 3-loss team is definitely eliminated in the Big 10. I think we're going to probably have maybe 2 undefeateds or an undefeated and 1 loss. But for now, we'll say those 2-loss teams may be still alive. And some of them actually do control their own destiny because of the opponents they have coming up. But these are your new eliminations this week. Again, completely eliminated. We've gotten rid of, 16 more teams? So it's starting to narrow down, and we're going to go through all the teams now that are still alive. And let's go to the teams that... All right, these are the teams that must win their conference. So they've been eliminated from at-large contention, but they could still get in if they win their conference. Arizona State, Baylor, Cal, Duke, Iowa State, Kansas, and Kansas State out of the Big 12. And then out of the ACC, NC State. Actually, no, we've mixed both of those up. We've mixed all the conferences up. In just a second, we're going to break it down by conference. But these are all the teams that must win their conference: NC State, SMU, Stanford, TCU, UCLA, Utah, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. Basically, these teams have to win out, pretty much. You know, a team like SMU, they're undefeated in the conference. Maybe they could lose and still get into the ACC championship. And, maybe some of these teams have that option. But for the most part, these teams must win out. So if you're a fan of these teams, win out, and you're probably in. You might need a little help, like a UCLA is going to need some help in the Big 10. But if you win, actually, I don't know that for sure because I don't know who's left on the schedule. Maybe they do get in if they win out. But these teams, if they win out, they have a really, really good shot to get to their conference championship game. And then if they win it, they're in the playoff. Now, are there any serious teams here that we really think could get there? I think Arizona State could win the Big 12. That might be about it, though. SMU, I think, could win the ACC. So there are some teams to look at here, but they've got to win their conference. Now, how about at-large teams? Teams that are still alive for an at-large spot? Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, Pitt, and Virginia in the ACC. These teams win out in the regular season, lose their conference championship. They're probably still going to be in. Not guaranteed, but probably still in. Or they have a real good shot, at least. Or maybe it goes a different way. Maybe they somehow don't get to the conference championship because they lose somewhere late in the season. BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech out of the Big 12. Those teams also could get in as an at-large team. Again, different ways that could happen. And then in the SEC, or excuse me, in the Big 10, a bunch of teams still alive. Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Washington. A lot of these teams with 2 losses, like, they can win out and not get to the Big 10 championship. And if you're 10-2, you're gonna have a really good shot to get in. So all these teams still have a really decent shot if they win out. In fact, I would say if they win out, probably going to be in. All these teams probably going to be in if they win out. Yeah. I mean, you look at what they'll have on the schedule and the opportunity to build a resume. I think you're probably in. And the same thing happens here in the SEC. Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Missouri, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt. All these teams are sitting there with 1 loss. Or what's crazy with the SEC, I don't think there's any 3-loss teams that are alive. I was just thinking about that. Auburn, Florida, we had talked about them when they had 3 losses. They still had a chance. Now, one of these teams could wind up with 3 losses and still have a chance to get in. But that is interesting. Sorry, just thought about that. But yeah, all of these teams, if they win out, I mean, they're going to be in, right? Yeah, all these teams, if they win out, they're in. Because these teams all have, LSU has 2 losses, but Texas has 2 losses. But if they win out, I mean, their resume is going to be strong enough. So, again, Big 10, SEC teams, a lot of teams still alive for at-large spots. But in the ACC and the Big 12, it's almost like most of the teams are going to have to win out to get in. That's there are a few exceptions, but that's the case for most of those teams. So now I did this week, and we'll do this moving forward. What if all the favorites went out? And I just kind of went through the schedules and looked at who I believe will be favored in all these games, who's ranked higher right now, and all that. And this is how I think the playoff will look if all of the favorites went out. So Ohio State should be favored in the rest of their games. Alabama should be favored in the rest of their games. That puts them at 1-2. Indiana should be favored in every game except the Big 10 championship. Georgia, I think, will be an underdog against Alabama, but they should be favored in the rest of their regular season games. So that's your top 4, Ohio State, Alabama, Indiana, and Georgia. Then we go to number 5, Oregon. I think they're going to be favored in the rest of their games, so they should be sitting there at 11-1. They should be number 5. Miami should be favored in the rest of their games, win the ACC. Texas Tech, I think, will be favored in the rest of their games, win the Big 12. Then we get to number 8, Ole Miss. I think they're underdogs against Oklahoma. And I could actually look that up. I haven't looked yet, but I'm assuming they're going to be underdogs in that game, playing on the road. But still, 10-2. That's going to be enough to get them in number 8, Texas A&M. Underdog against Texas at the end of the season, I think. And maybe there's another game where they're an underdog. So 10-2 for them. And then you've got number 10, Notre Dame should be favored in the rest of their games. Georgia Tech will be favored, I believe, in the rest of their ACC games. So you just have the Georgia game. So that means they would go undefeated in the ACC. They'd be 11-1, lose to Miami in the ACC championship. Should be enough to get them in. And then I think South Florida is the team that will be favored in the American. So this is what the playoff picture looks like right now. Again, if we don't see upsets from the top teams, which we will, and it's not gonna look like this, but if the favorites did happen to win out, I believe this is what the playoff would look like right now. And this does not mean how would the playoff look if the season ended today. To be clear, this is how will the playoff look if the rest of the season goes, again, with no upsets, with the favorites all winning. So that's the updated playoff picture and the updated eliminations. A ton of eliminations this week. Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.